All right, so we got word about an hour or so ago, a couple hours ago, that a music legend, Clive Davis, had passed away.
Yeah.
He's in his 90s, and we're going to talk with a kind of a music industry expert. Mm-hmm. So, Dave, you just let us know when he's all set, ready to go. And let's see, what else did we want to talk about?
So let me give you a little background on Jem. That's who we're chatting with.
Oh, Jem Aswad.
Jem Aswad.
Who is with Variety.
He is. He's the executive editor of Music of Variety. And he joined the publication in 2017. He's had a ton of awards. I believe Jem is going to join us now this morning. Hey, Jem, thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate it.
So sorry I'm a little late.
Oh, it's all great. What when you heard the news that Clive Davis, who has been greatly honored, I feel, in recent awards presentations, et cetera, for a great career, what were the first maybe stories that came to your mind?
Well, I interviewed him probably 10 or 12 times. I wouldn't say I knew him necessarily, but we were quite familiar. And we did a lot around his 90th birthday 4 years ago. I mean, he is one of the greatest music executives of all time. Absolutely no question about it. And unlike a lot of people, because usually an executive is good at one or two things, he had a rare ability to combine knowing talent and knowing when a song was going to work and business acumen and basically knowing what to do with that talent, how to package it. It didn't always fit. And, certainly not every artist loved what his plans were. But for someone like, for example, Carlos Santana, who he had signed back in the 1960s and helped guide to some of the greatest moments of his career, what was it, in 1999, he made a different kind of record with Carlos Santana. He paired him with some of the greatest hit makers of the era, like Rob Thomas and Lauryn Hill and people like that.
Wow.
And made one of the biggest selling records of all time with that. Now, it didn't really sound like someone who, what you would expect from Santana in the 1960s, but it rebooted his entire career, and Clive was behind both phases of that career.
I feel like Sedona's own Michelle Branch had one of the biggest hits of that era, in fact, with The Game of Love. Well, but who would you say would be, if you had to pick two or three artists who were most kind of closely linked to Clive Davis, who would they be?
Well, the two of them, obviously, Whitney Houston was almost his biggest project, for lack of a better word, because, he signed her, he mentored her, and her later career obviously was not a success and had an awful lot of problems, but right through the 80s and into the 90s, I mean, it went exactly precisely according to plan and made so many great records in the process. So she is one. Alicia Keys is another, kind of the same story, well, except for the end of it. But, she had a failed record deal with Columbia Records. He redirected her career, set her up in the right way. He got her on Oprah very early in her career, and her debut album was a massive, massive, massive success. Other more established artists, and I'm going to break your three rule here, had a lot to do with Bruce Springsteen's career. When he heard Springsteen's first record, and it was 3 records before Bruce actually broke through, he said to him, I love the record. It needs two songs I can get on the radio. Springsteen took him seriously, went home and wrote, I think it was Blinded by the Light and Growing Up. Maybe it was Spirit in the Night. I forget which one, but he wrote 2 very radio-ready songs. Again, that album still wasn't a hit, but Bruce heard Clive. And also Simon and Garfunkel. They were well established by the time that Clive assumed the presidency of Columbia Records, but he was a driving force behind Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
A single like that before. It was a 5-minute long song, and he turned it into a #1 single.
Jem, I was did a deep dive here looking at some of the biggest icons associated with Clive Davis, some of the ones that you mentioned, but Barry Manilow, Pink, Janis Joplin, Rod Stewart, Aretha Franklin. You know this better than we do. It's interesting, though, when you you look at the history of music, and you've covered it for so many years at a high level and so in depth, but there's always people behind the people, right, that help lead them to so much success.
Yeah, and I mean, I was remiss in not mentioning Barry Manilow right there, because his career was almost entirely guided by Clive. And he himself has said every time that he didn't listen to Clive, Clive ended up being right. Now, that's not to say he was perfect. A lot of artists did not have great relationships with him. Kelly Clarkson is one in particular. But he usually saw the way to go to commercial, if not necessarily artistic, success.
That's so great. All right, so you have had the kind of exclusive ability to get so many sit-downs with him over the years. If there was one story before we wrap up here that maybe will give us a little bit of an insight into Clive Davis, the man, his personality. We know he was a great record executive.
Yeah.
Maybe share one more story of him.
This is the thing with Clive. First of all, I didn't have that exclusive access. I mean, a lot of people did. He wasn't hard to reach or to talk to. If I were to point to one thing, it is an article we did for his 90th birthday where we talked to 25 executives who worked for him, almost all of whom absolutely revered him. Their stories are much more telling than the stories that Clive told. And one of them, this is the best one. There is an executive, when they were working on that Santana record, there's an executive who, they had done a song with the rapper Everlast, who was big at the time. And Everlast manager wanted to take the song for an Everlast record. The executive says, "You can't do that. I've made Clive this promise, you just can't." And the manager says, "Nope, we're taking it." So the executive runs up to Clive's office, catches him just as he's leaving, follows him out of the building, gets in a car with him, and Clive says, "All right, call the manager." And he says, "Shh," like that. And he gets on the manager and he says, "Hello, manager. This is Clive Davis. Do you know who I am?" the manager is saying, like, "What did Pete tell you to call me? Who is this?" And he's like, No. You say you know who I am. You know who I am. You'll give the song back, and I'll leave it at that. And he hangs up, and the next day they had the song back. It was a total Don Corleone move.
Oh my!
Is there anyone in music right now that rivals him? Anybody behind the scenes that works with artists right now that helps them, boost and with fans?
Like, who's the next Clive Davis?
Yeah, who's the next Clive Davis?
There aren't. I mean, you almost can't make that comparison because things are so different now. Record companies aren't as dominant as they were because yes, you do need a record company to achieve big success, but not as much as you used to. There's tons of great record executives. Jimmy Iovine was a great record executive, but he's now retired. John Janik, who replaced him at Interscope. Oh gosh, I mean, and there's a whole new younger generation of record executives who are more attuned with the 21st century. So, but there will never be another Clive Davis. I think it's pretty safe to say.
Perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you, Jem.